This is Dr. Crawford, Genetics, Bio 220. This is a review of Lab 1, Module 1, Mendelian Genetics. You should do the lab first and then go back and look at this review to see how you are doing. This is a simulation. You are looking at a mythical creature where you're looking at several traits and using Mendel's principles to see how they are inherited. So you're going to click on a pair to select those phenotypes for the P generation, which is the first generation. So we're going to look at one trait at a time to start. Let me see if I can do this. Rotate it down. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is select a female for the P generation. Okay, this is and then this is the male. All right, so now we have a cross between a female with white eyes, male with black eyes, no tail, tail, and we continue. All right, so this is the F1. In the F1, we see that 53 have black eyes in terms of the females, and 52 have black eyes in terms of the males, which means that since each parent was, one parent was white eye and one parent was black eye, if all of the offspring have black eyes, then black eyes is dominant. So if we're looking at that trait alone, that's what we would see. In the case of the tail, we saw that one parent had tails, the other did not, but they all have no tails, meaning that no tails is dominant. So no tails is dominant and black eyes is dominant. Okay. Now you can select the F1 cross. So we have a male and female, and now we have the F2. Now the F1 would actually be a dihybrid. The black would be heterozygous, and the no tail is heterozygous, which gives us a dihybrid cross for the F2. And therefore, the F2 you would expect a 9:3 to 3:1 phenotypic ratio, where 9/16 are dominant for both traits, 3/16 would have tails, and would be dominant for one and recessive for the other. So they would have white eyes and no tails, or tails and black eyes. And then 1/16 would be recessive for both. And so what you're supposed to do is look at these numbers. So here we have male and female can be counted together because this trait is not being inherited as a sex-linked trait. There's no difference in pattern of inheritance in males and females. So here we have approximately 24 and 29. So that total would give us, you add the two together to get the total. And that should give us about 9/16 of the total number of progeny, and you have to calculate that. And then 7 and 3 are 10, 10 and 13 are 23, and then 4 are recessive for both. And so these should work out to be a 9:3 to 3:1 ratio if we're dealing with Mendel's laws. Okay. And so basically that's how you do it. You can do one trait at a time, or you can do both. So you could then start all over and do another simulation, but that's basically the story here. So what I'm going to do then is to go back to the problem set and look at the question. Okay, so here you were studying two traits in a fictional mammal-like organism. The wild-type phenotype is black eyes and tailless. The white eyes and tails are mutant traits which are recessive, which we found out by looking at the genetic cross. And all P generation organisms are assumed to be homozygous. So we found out by doing the test that the inheritance pattern of white eye was recessive. And then, of course, you just fill in your crosses and record the data that you obtained. Then we did the F1 and the F2. And is there a significant difference in the expression of the white eye trait in males and females in the F1 or the F2? And there wasn't, indicating that the gene is not on the X chromosome. What are the genotypes of the P generation cross? Again, assuming that they're homozygous, you can fill those out. And based on the F1 generation results, which allele, white or black, is dominant? I think we've already seen that when I went over briefly the actual simulation, that black was dominant. You don't need to do a Punnett square here. I think you can just write out the answer. That's no problem. What is the genotype of the F1 individuals? They would be heterozygous for both traits, if we're looking at both traits. And if we're looking at one trait, they're heterozygous for the one trait. And again, we're looking for, in a single cross of just the F2 for black eye versus white eye, where the F1s are hybrids or heterozygous, the F2 would be the 3-to-1 ratio of black to white monohybrid cross. If we're doing the dihybrid, which I showed you in the simulation, then we're dealing with a 9-to-3 to 3-to-1 dihybrid result. Now you should look at your expected percentages. If it's one trait you're looking at, it's 3-to-1 or 75 to 25%, and your hypothesis would be the 3-to-1 ratio. Tail, you do the same exact thing for tail. You're going to see that again. We notice that no tail is dominant, and therefore in the F2 you're going to see a 3-to-1 ratio for the no tail to tail. And that's essentially it. If you look at both traits, which you could do, it's not really asked here, but if you look at both traits together, that's where you're going to see the dihybrid, where in the F2 you're going to have the 9-to-3 to 3-to-1 ratio. So this is just an elaboration of Mendel's laws, and just to see that you understand how you would determine patterns of inheritance based upon the simple dominance relationships between alleles, and looking at monohybrid and dihybrid crosses.